The courage to ask, embracing vulnerability as our greatest strength. Welcome to a transformative journey of self-discovery and human connection. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that touches every aspect of our lives, yet one we often shy away from, the power of asking for help. I'm thrilled to share with you the profound insights I've gained from my recent conversation with Samantha Porter, a visionary leader who's revolutionizing how we perceive vulnerability and human connection. Samantha Porter isn't just a thought leader, she's a beacon of hope in a world that often celebrates self-reliance to a fault. Her groundbreaking work in reframing the act of asking for help has touched countless lives, sparking a movement that's reshaping our understanding of strength, resilience, and human interdependence. Through her tireless efforts, Samantha is quite literally changing the world, one vulnerable conversation at a time. As I sat across from Samantha, her eyes alight with passion, I was struck by the simplicity and power of her core message. Help is not a dirty word. It's a phrase that might seem obvious at first glance, but its implications run deep, challenging the very foundations of how we view ourselves and our relationships with others. Samantha's words resonated with me on a profound level. Learning how to ask for help when you are in the biggest problem of your life is not just important, it's crucial. Let that sink in for a moment. How many of us, when faced with our darkest hours, retreat into ourselves, convinced that we must weather the storm alone? But here's the truth that Samantha so eloquently illuminates. Not asking for help is a form of self-induced suffering. It's a harsh reality, but one we must confront if we're to grow and thrive as individuals and as a society. In my years as a real estate agent with Keller Williams, I've witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences of this mindset. The number one factor I've observed in foreclosures isn't a lack of financial resources, it's pride. It's the paralyzing fear of asking for help. The shame that envelops people when they're struggling is palpable and is destroying lives, families, and communities. Imagine for a moment a world where reaching out for support is seen as an act of courage rather than weakness. A world where vulnerability is celebrated as the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and deep human connection. This is the world Samantha Porter envisions, and it's a vision that has the power to transform our lives in ways we can scarcely imagine. Let me share with you a story that illustrates the profound impact of this shift in perspective. Sarah, a successful executive, found herself drowning in debt after a series of unfortunate events. For months, she suffered in silence, too ashamed to admit her struggles to anyone. Her health deteriorated, her relationship strained, and she was on the brink of losing everything she had worked so hard to build. It wasn't until she attended one of Samantha's workshops that Sarah finally found the courage to reach out. With trembling hands, she called her family and closest friends, revealing her situation and asking for help. The response was overwhelming. Not only did she receive financial support, but the act of opening up created a ripple effect of compassion and connection in her community. Today, Sarah is not only debt free, but also leads support groups for other professionals facing similar challenges. Her story is a testament to the transformative power of vulnerability and the strength found in asking for help. But why is this so difficult for us? Why do we resist something that could potentially save us from financial ruin, emotional distress, or even just unnecessary stress? The answer lies in our deeply ingrained perceptions of vulnerability. From a young age, we're taught that being vulnerable is synonymous with being weak. We're conditioned to believe that needing help somehow diminishes our worth, that it's a sign of failure or inadequacy. Samantha challenges this notion head on. She argues, and I wholeheartedly agree, that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but an act of immense courage. It requires us to step out of our comfort zones, to admit that we don't have all the answers, and to open ourselves up to the possibility of rejection or judgment. Think about the last time you asked for help. How did it make you feel? If you're like most people, the mere thought probably made you uncomfortable. Your palms might have gotten sweaty, your heart rate might have increased. That's because asking for help requires us to be vulnerable, to admit that we don't have all the answers. But here's where Samantha's wisdom really shines through. She posits that this vulnerability, this willingness to reach out and connect with others, is actually our greatest strength. It's not about having all the answers, it's about having the courage to admit when we don't. Let me share another story that illustrates this point powerfully. John, a small business owner, was on the verge of bankruptcy. For years, he had prided himself on being self-reliant, never asking for help even when things got tough. As his business crumbled around him, he isolated himself, too ashamed to admit his struggles to anyone. It wasn't until he stumbled upon one of Samantha's talks that he realized the toll his pride was taking. With great trepidation, he reached out to his network, sharing his challenges and asking for support. The response was overwhelming. Not only did he receive practical advice and financial assistance, but his vulnerability created deeper connections with his peers, clients, and even competitors. Today, John's business is thriving, not just financially, but as a hub of community and collaboration. He credits his success not to his individual efforts, but to the strength he found in vulnerability and the power of his community. These stories challenge us at our core. They force us to confront our own biases and fears. But isn't that what growth is all about? Stepping out of our comfort zones, challenging our preconceptions, and daring to do things differently. As I absorbed Samantha's words, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Hope for a future where we no longer suffer in silence, where we no longer let our pride stand in the way of our well being. A future where asking for help is as natural as breathing. But how do we get there? How do we bridge the gap between where we are now and this vision of a more connected, more vulnerable, and ultimately stronger society? Samantha offers some practical advice that I believe can transform our lives and communities. One, start small. We don't have to bare our souls to the world overnight. Maybe it's asking a colleague for help with a project or reaching out to a friend when we're feeling overwhelmed. These small acts of vulnerability can help us build the courage muscle, making it easier to ask for help when the stakes are higher. Two, create safe spaces. We need to foster environments where vulnerability is welcomed and celebrated. This could be in our workplaces, our communities, or our homes. By creating spaces where it's okay to not have all the answers, we make it easier for people to reach out when they need support. Three, be the change. If we want to live in a world where asking for help is normalized, we need to be willing to ask for help ourselves. We need to model the behavior we want to see in others. This means being open about our own struggles and needs and reaching out for support when we need it. Four, practice empathy. When someone reaches out to us for help, we need to respond with compassion and understanding. By creating positive experiences around asking for help, we encourage more people to do the same. Five, reframe our understanding of strength. True strength lies not in going it alone, but in having the courage to reach out and connect with others. We need to challenge the notion that independence equals strength and start celebrating interdependence. Let me share one more story that illustrates the power of these principles in action. Maria, a high school teacher, noticed that her students were struggling with stress and anxiety but were reluctant to seek help. Inspired by Samantha's work, she decided to implement a vulnerability circle in her classroom. Once a week, students and teachers alike would share something they were struggling with and ask for help. At first, participation was hesitant, but as weeks went by, something remarkable happened. The atmosphere in the school began to change. Students became more supportive of each other, grades improved, and incidents of bullying decreased dramatically. The impact extended beyond the school walls. Parents reported that their children were more open at home, and the community began to adopt similar practices in local organizations. What started as a small classroom initiative became a community-wide movement towards greater empathy, support, and connection. As we reflect on these stories and insights, I want you to consider this. What would your life look like if you embraced vulnerability as a strength? How would your relationships change if you were more open about your struggles and needs? What impact could you have on your community if you created spaces that celebrated asking for help? Samantha's vision is not just a pipe dream, it's a possibility that's within our grasp. But it starts with us. It starts with having the courage to reach out, to be vulnerable, to ask for help when we need it. So I want to leave you with a challenge. In the next week, I want you to ask for help with something. It doesn't have to be big. Maybe it's asking for directions when you're lost, or reaching out to a friend when you're feeling down. Whatever it is, I want you to notice how it feels. Notice the courage it takes, the connection it creates. And remember, every time you ask for help, you're not just helping yourself, you're contributing to a cultural shift. You're showing others that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to not have all the answers. You're paving the way for a world where help is not a dirty word, but a bridge to connection, growth, and resilience. As we come to the end of our time together, I want you to imagine a world where vulnerability is celebrated, where asking for help is seen as an act of courage, and where no one has to face their challenges alone. This world is not a distant utopia, it's a reality we can create starting today with each small act of vulnerability. I challenge you to be a pioneer in this movement, to be the one who takes the first step, who reaches out, who shows others that it's okay to ask for help. Because in doing so, you're not just changing your life, you're changing the world. Remember the words of Samantha Porter: help is not a dirty word. Let these words be your mantra, your call to action, your reminder that in our vulnerability lies our greatest strength. So go forth and be courageously vulnerable. Ask for help when you need it. Offer help when you can. Create spaces where others feel safe to do the same. Be the catalyst for a culture of compassion, connection, and mutual support. The world is waiting for your courage. It's waiting for your vulnerability. It's waiting for you to show that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but the ultimate act of strength. Will you answer the call? Will you be the one to break the silence, to shatter the stigma, to show others the way? The power is in your hands. The time is now. Let's create a world where no one suffers in silence, where pride doesn't stand in the way of well-being, where asking for help is as natural as breathing. Together, we can make this vision a reality. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery and transformation. Now go out there and change the world, one courageous ask at a time.